Hello and welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Aaron Porras, and coming up in today's newscast, the teachers' union and the government finally come to terms, and school will be starting on time. Meantime, the Commission of Inquiry into the Mount Meron Disaster names former Prime Minister Netanyahu and a number of other top officials as potentially liable. And later, the world mourning the passing of the late great Soviet leader, Mikhail Gorbachev. At long last, the teachers' strike is over and school will begin on time September 1st as the Finance Ministry and the teachers' union in Israel finally come to terms. Crisis averted. The Israeli school year will begin as planned and without the need for court order. This as negotiations between the teachers' union and the Finance Ministry finally reach an agreement, and not a moment too soon with classes scheduled to begin Thursday, September 1st. All that's left to do is sign on the dotted line, and the deal will take effect until at least 2026. In any case, Finance Minister Avigdor Lieberman saying the year will begin with a stronger and higher quality education system after, quote, profound changes were accepted. And the teachers' union head, Yafa Ben David, similarly applauding the resolution, but adding that it's just the first step in the root treatment that Israel's schooling system needs. Now, among the tenets of the agreements, Lieberman agreeing to the union's requested salary increases both for starting and experienced teachers. New teachers will now receive a salary of 9,000 shekels per month and with bonuses for excellence and initiative of up to 1,000 shekels. Then, after 3 years of teaching, educators will get a raise to 10,000 shekels per month as incentive to stay in the field. Principals, meantime, will earn starting wages of 19,000 per month, and they'll be able to hire specialists from outside the system as needed, in special needs classrooms, for example. Then in return for these demands, there will be a streamlined process to fire teachers and a 3-year waiting period to qualify for tenure. Further, teachers will accept a change to their vacation days to better match up with working parents who struggle to find childcare when schools are in recess. For one, the fast of Esther and the holiday of Lag BaOmer, as well as the days after the Passover, Shavuot, and Sukkot holidays, will no longer be vacation days. And instead, teachers will have time off between Yom Kippur and Sukkot, plus 2 vacation days to use as they see fit. The State Commission of Inquiry into the Mount Meron tragedy of 2021, Israel's worst civilian disaster in which 45 people were killed, now issuing warnings to a number of top officials in the government that they may be held responsible. And chief among the list is former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Joining me to discuss is founder and CEO of the Yad Le'olim organization and former member of Knesset with the Yesh Atid party, Rabbi Dov Lipman. Rabbi, thank you for being with us now. The commission states that as Prime Minister for over 12 years, Netanyahu knew or should have known about the risks at Mount Meron, especially as multiple state offices and even previous governments issued multiple warnings. Netanyahu, meantime, is essentially saying that he wasn't aware of these warnings because, as Prime Minister, he was busy looking at the macro issues and put others in charge of such events. What do you think of this reasoning?
So I had the unfortunate task of being closely involved with many of the families immediately after the Meron disaster and tragedy. And I was involved in helping them get into the country, involved in some of the memorial services, funerals. And I was there on that Friday when they were identifying bodies at the National Morgue. These families need to see leaders who are taking responsibility for what happened. I'm not getting into what should the ramifications be, what should the consequences be, but when you're people who are either citizens of the Jewish state or you sent your children to study in the Jewish state from abroad, you want to know that the leaders of that Jewish state are willing to take responsibility when a catastrophe of this kind happens. And I think that is the important step that is coming from these letters, is that hopefully it'll begin a process where some of these leaders will look into the camera and say, I apologize because I made a mistake. I wasn't as focused on this as I should have been. And that's what I know the families and probably the broader country as well is very much waiting to hear.
All right, now, in addition to Netanyahu, former Public Security Minister Amir Ohana, Israel Police Chief Kobi Shabtai, and former Northern District Police Chief Shimon Levy is also receiving warnings. What kind of punishments might actually come of this?
So it's going to be very interesting to see if there's any actual criminal prosecution that comes from it. I believe it's unfortunate that given the election season, people are turning this into some kind of a political spin in either direction. Meaning, I wouldn't want to see Netanyahu and Likud's opponents using this to say, don't vote for them because look how they failed. But at the same time, I don't want to see Netanyahu and the Likud doing what they're doing, which is saying this is all politics and it's all to impact the elections. This is a real tragedy that took place with 45 people who lost their lives. And there are benefits of being in leadership positions where you get a lot of praise when a lot of good things happen. So if there are peace deals that are made and the economy is doing great, you can take credit for it. But then when there are moments like this that take place and a commission has taken the time to study it and has said, yes, there are faults with various people, they need to stand up and take responsibility. What the consequences are in terms of people losing their jobs, in terms of what happens in the elections, that I want to remove from the equation for the moment. But I know that people just want to hear someone say, yes, I take responsibility. We have to do better the next time, and here's how we're going to do that.
Do you think that the commission or the powers that be would maybe give more leniency in terms of punishments should Netanyahu and other leaders take that step and take responsibility?
I think that'll play a role. You see this very often, and even in regular court situations, where very often a person standing up and taking responsibility does have an impact in terms of the consequences. And I certainly hope that will happen. There's also a country that's seeing its greatest civilian disaster go without any kind of consequences really anywhere, except for one minor person who stepped down from a position in terms of the positions that we're talking about. I do think it absolutely could have an impact because the first step in knowing that we're going to prevent this from happening in the future is people taking responsibility, saying this is where things went wrong and this is where things have to change. I don't know that people are looking just for punishment. I don't think that's the goal. I think the goal is let this not be for naught and let's learn from it. And part of that is the pipeline of leadership, from the prime minister to the ministers to the other people that are involved, recognizing where their mistakes were made and actually acknowledging that they had these failures. So, will the criminal prosecution system pursue people? I'm not in that realm to know exactly where that might apply. If it does apply, they absolutely should. If there are people who are supposed to be criminally held responsible for it. And if not, then it shouldn't be that way. Meaning, like I said, all politics should be removed from it. It should be dealt with based on the facts and let the chips fall where they may.
So in an interim report released last November, the commission recommended a cap on the number of participants allowed in the festivities in the future, a single central location for a bonfire lighting ceremony, and the appointment of a minister who would oversee this event. Is that enough?
It's definitely a really important start. In other words, the question is, where's the starting point? Is the starting point that the tens of thousands of people or even more hundreds of thousands of people have to be allowed to go there? Or is the starting point, let's make this safe, let's be smart, and let's build out based on that? You can study the history and see where Lag BaOmer, where this day fits into our life cycle events. And it's not very high. I'm not diminishing from the meaning that it has to people, but at the same time, if we reduce the numbers, if we change the way that it's done, it's not like we're altering the way a religious service has been done for thousands of years.
All right, Rabbi Lippman, thank you so much again.
Thank you.
Moving on, the world is in mourning today. Former Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev passing away Tuesday night at age 91. Citizens and state leaders from every corner of the globe bowing their heads today in mourning over the late Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev, who passed away Tuesday night at age 91. But Jewish organizations are eulogizing the late leader not only for lifting the Iron Curtain and seeing an end to the Cold War, but for his opposition to anti-Semitism in the USSR, as well as his support for Soviet Jews to freely practice their religion and even emigrate. In 1991, Gorbachev famously condemning the venomous sprouts of anti-Semitism that arose in Soviet soil, adding that the Stalin regime heavily used anti-Semitism as a means to isolate the country and strengthen its dictatorial position. But of course, much to Gorbachev's sorrow, millions of Jews indeed still left the USSR for the United States, Europe, and Israel. Of course, while most look back at his legacy favorably, there are those who blame him for many of the issues that the former Soviet countries still face today. In fact, Putin and Gorbachev famously at odds in their outlook on the division of the USSR, particularly amidst the onset of the invasion of Ukraine. Gorbachev's biographer, Professor William Taubman, saying that his goal was to make Russia the kind of place where Westerners would have wanted to live, but he failed. And many, particularly in Russia, blame him for the so-called regression of Russia in our time. It seemed to us back then that he was a person who could change the Soviet Union for the better. But then when his time was coming to an end, it turned out that he was a person who broke up the Soviet Union, broke up a vast country, which led to a large number of wars and civil unrest in the former Soviet republics between the people of the Soviet Union. That is why I don't have a high opinion of him now, of his life journey and his achievements.
Well, Mikhail Gorbachev sent a wind of freedom into Russian society. He tried to change the communist system from inside, which became impossible. And he started an era of cooperation with the West, stopping the Cold War. And happily, the hopes has vanished.
Still, the good far outweighing the bad. Gorbachev's policies of supporting openness, free speech, and restructuring forever changing the lives of millions for the better.